Barry Sonnenfeld, welcome to Bullseye. I'm so happy to have you on the show, and I enjoyed your book so much.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be on your show.
You were making an argument in favor of affectation before we went on microphone, a pro-affectation argument. I was thinking, there's some affectation anecdotes in the book, but I happened to have the book immediately in front of me, and I was like, yes, this is a man who on the cover of his own book is wearing a wristwatch on each on each wrist.
Yes, I have to tell you that that affectation has done me well. There are several others that wear 2 wristwatches, although now it's become quite a thing, I think. But I met Brian Williams, and he had 2 wristwatches, and one of his wristwatches is the same of one of mine, which is the Breitling Emergency. If you unscrew a knob on the Breitling Emergency, it will send out a rescue me please signal on both the EMT rescue channel and to satellites in outer space. And Breitling will pay, I think, up to $100,000 to have you rescued if you're in need of being rescued.
When you say satellites in outer space, they would do the rescuing?
They receive the signal. Then they call someone. The satellites call someone. By the way, I guess all satellites, by definition, are probably in outer space, so that might have been redundant. I'm sorry.
On their way there or back also, I guess. But yeah.
Right. The reason I got the watch is I was in a plane crash in Van Nuys Airport that destroyed a Gulfstream II. And my wife, as an expensive joke, got me the Breitling Emergency in case I was ever in a plane crash. But 2 things. First of all, I own other watches, and you can never take the Breitling off, because if you do this, the Jews call it a Kunahara, which means the evil eye of God. And if you take your Breitling Emergency watch off, God says, schmuck, he took the watch off, watch this, and then you're in an avalanche or something. So you can never take this off, but I own other watches, hence the affectation of wearing 2 watches.
When you were in an airplane crash, which you were, you're not a not nervous guy. Did it cause you anxiety moving forward?
Well, Jesse, here's my theory. Every time I get off an airplane, I view it as a failed suicide attempt. That was until I was a terrible flyer. I would wake my wife up over Kansas when I would hear the engine sound go from to I'd wake her up. What's going on? We're in trouble. She explained that planes fly from one VOR to another VOR. It was very complicated, but I lived in fear. Once I was in the plane crash, see, the reason you're afraid is because you don't know how you're going to react. Will snot be coming out of my nose? Will I weep uncontrollably? And what happened to me, and again, I was the only one on this private jet, is I put my feet up in front of me, I crossed my arms, and I said out loud, and now I die. And then I tried different line readings. I tried, and now I die. And then I tried, and now anyway, I went through all of them. We crashed. The pilot, co-pilot, and flight attendant fled the plane, leaving me on the plane. The Van Nuys Fire Department had to come and help me get off the plane, et cetera, et cetera. But I became a much better flyer after that because I realized, if that's what knowing you're going to die in a plane crash is like, I can handle that. So it actually made me a better passenger, which is why I did not sue the company.
Has that been true of other traumas in your life, other things that you were afraid of?
It's funny you should say that because I'm 71, and I was thinking, how much longer do I want to live? And I was thinking maybe I shouldn't be, wanting to live that much longer. Then I went to a racetrack. We live up in Canada now. I went to a racetrack and was racing in this car, and I was the slowest guy on the racetrack because I realized, oh man, maybe I don't want to die. So, life experiences have been very kind to me, I guess.
A life wish is what they call that.
Is it?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Why not?
As I was reading your book, which is really a ton of fun, I thought to myself, like 6 chapters in, I know that this is the book of a cinematographer because of the 8 anecdotes that have been related to me thus far, 6 of them are about lighting setups.
That's very true. Yes, not only that, but I also like to control everything. I'm a real control freak. And like I got here an hour early to make sure that they looked at me with my glasses on, because a lot of times I'll have my assistant say, and Barry wears glasses, but you still come into the room and they go, oh man, I'm seeing all these. And then you're sitting there for 20 minutes while they're trying to figure things out. I'm trying not to help them figure things out. As you know, I shot, I think 9 or 10 feature films. So yes, I try, listen, change the topic briefly. I know I have to go back to work when I say to my wife, if you put the butter 1 drawer down in the fridge, that's when she turns to me and says, you need to get a job really quickly, because I need to direct everything. I need to light everything. I need to control everything. And of course, it's totally due to my mother, as is everything.
Did you think when you were in film school that you were going to be a director, or was cinematographer what you aspired to?
I was pretty sure when I was in film school, I was going to be perhaps the best FedEx driver that ever there was. I just had a sense I'd be really, really good at it. Like I'd know everyone's names, and because, but no, I went to NYU graduate film school, but totally by accident. I thought I wanted to be a still photographer, and then I realized it's a fairly lonely profession. You'll have other friends in the business, but I wanted to be a street photographer like Elliot Erwitt or Gary Winogrand or Lee Friedlander, and I wasn't that good, and I wasn't that patient. So my mother said if I went to graduate film school, my parents would pay for my education. So I'm thinking 3 years, don't have to look for a job. Sounds like a great idea. Oh, my mother also said, and she was totally wrong about this, that movies are just a bunch of still photographs put together, which, by the way, is so not true. And becoming a cinematographer ruined me for stills, because stills are a very specific moment. Yet all the work I did as a cinematographer, I moved the camera through space, whether it's Blood Simple or Raising Arizona or Throw Momma from the Train. I was always using the camera to tell the audience where to look. So I was always dollying and stuff. So when I went back to still photography as just a hobby, my frames were always off and they were never aligned properly because I was, ready for the movement. But I went to NYU. My parents didn't pay for my education. And in fact, we still often didn't have electricity. I moved to the East Village, which freaked out my mother. And then at film school, I realized I had an ability to be a cinematographer. And my father said to me, figure out what you want to do in life and do it. Don't figure out how to make a living. Figure out what would bring you pleasure. So what I did is when I got out of film school, I bought a 16 millimeter camera. This is pre-video. My theory being if I owned a camera, I could legitimately call myself a cameraman without being a dilettante. 6 months later, I'm at a party. I meet Joel Coen. Joel says, my brother Ethan and I are going to shoot a trailer as if we had directed this movie and use a trailer to raise money to then shoot the real feature. I said, I own a camera. Joel said, you're hired. And the first day on the set of Blood Simple, their first movie, was the first day Joel, Ethan, or I had ever been on a movie set.
Okay. This origin story.
Yes, sir.
Reminds me of nothing, if not because one time I talked to Werner Herzog.
Love him.
Oh, what a delight. And he could hardly have more fun than to talk to Werner Herzog. He just Werner Herzog's around the whole time. It's really great. I got him to say that when he wants to relax, he likes to watch soccer, but he doesn't have a favorite sitcom. But anyway, Werner Herzog, he has this film school. Theoretically, I don't know how practical and real it is, but his premise is that you should do what he did, which is he started in the film school, thought it was boring or whatever. So he checked out some equipment from the school and then quit and kept the equipment. But it's the thing of it is, right, is owning that camera, which is like a really meaningful, it's a at the time, particularly big, expensive piece of equipment, even a 16 millimeter camera, is the difference between being a filmmaker and not.
Absolutely. And not being a dilettante. If you own a camera, you are a cameraman. In fact, at some point, I will play for you, perhaps when our discussion is over, my ringtone, which is Werner Herzog saying in that voice of his, "Barry, answer the phone. Barry, where are you? Answer the phone." We lived in Telluride for many years. Every year, Telluride has a film festival. I saw Werner at a coffee shop with Ken Burns, and Ken and I went to Hampshire College together. So I went right up to them and I said, "Werner, you're recording my ringtone. Just say, Barry, answer the phone." And it took like 30 takes. He would improvise and try other things, and I had to piece it together. But my ringtone is the really loud, obnoxious voice of Werner Herzog saying, "Barry, where are you? Answer your phone."
Barry, 100% you're playing that for me right now on the air into that microphone.
I'm going to have one of you guys call my phone.
Great. I got my phone here.
Okay. You're ready for the number, but please don't let anyone else in the world know. Please call.
Unknown caller. Answer the phone. You just answer the phone. Answer it right now. Answer the phone. Barry, where are you? Barry, answer the phone. You just answer the phone. Answer it right now. Answer the phone. Barry, where are you?
Now I'll turn my phone off again. So anyway, that took like literally 30 takes.
I like that there was a post-production process on your ringtone there.
It's all about post-production. Everything that goes wrong while you're shooting, you can correct in post-production.
What led you to think in film school that cinematography was something that you were good at? What was it?
I was a decent still photographer. I wasn't great, but I was decent. I had a photo I took of Buckminster Fuller was on the cover of one of his books. I had things published in Pop Photo, remember Popular Photography magazine? And I was always a wide angle guy. So I viewed the world through a camera.
Why were you a wide angle guy?
That's a really good question. Here's what I think it is. At least this is what it is in when you make movies. Wide angle lenses require you to be physically closer to the person, right? To get the same size image of a person, you have to be closer. And I am, in case you haven't noticed, a large personality. So it allows me to be close to things. And I love that. Also, with wide angle lenses, I like to center punch things instead of things being off to the left or right. They're dead center. And what I am saying to the audience, whether it's viewing a still photo or in the movies, is pay attention to me. I'm the cameraman. I'm the guy controlling all this stuff. Yes, you think it's the actors. You think it's the director. It's really me. And as an only child, I think that it really defined me through my lens selection.
I happen to have watched both of the Addams Family movies relatively recently, and I had never actually seen the second one, which I totally loved. It's so funny.
Thank you.
But one of the things that is going on in those movies, right, is they live in this crazy house. And so it could very easily look either like a television set or look sort of weird and tight and uncomfortable in the wrong way. And I think you really found ways to look at the inside of this weird house such that it feels like an expansive world.
A lot of that has to do with going back to lenses. Because the wide angle lens has such a wide angle of view, even if I shoot someone in a medium close-up, you're still seeing a lot of background, and that background is in focus. It's just the physical nature of what those lenses do. Other directors might have used longer lenses, the background would be out of focus, and the house would not have been a character in the movie. By the way, David Krumholtz, who plays Joel Glicker in Addams Family Values, who falls in love with Wednesday, is basically playing me as a child. In fact, I play his father in the movie. My favorite line in that movie is he says, "Do you know what happens if my mother uses fabric softener?" And Wednesday says, "What?" And he says, "I die."
You had a pretty great run of movies as a cinematographer, like combination of very skilled, good choices, and got lucky. Working on not just those first few Coen Brothers movies, but also a couple of Rob Reiner's greatest films. You were DP for When Harry Met Sally and Misery. Like, you worked on really great movies. But it occurred to me that if you take those two filmmakers or sets of filmmakers, the Coen Brothers and Rob Reiner, total geniuses. Like, I've seen The Princess Bride probably 100 times. You know what I mean?
Wow.
But 50 times. Let's not be hyperbolic. But like Rob Reiner, that's an actor and writer before he's a director. Obviously always been on sets because his dad was Carl Reiner. He started acting as a very young man. But like, that's not somebody who is there because all they ever think about is rack pans or whatever.
Right.
And the Coen Brothers, well, that's two guys where I bet they call each other at night to talk about rack pans.
Right.
So what was it like to move between those two worlds and the incredibly different demands of those kinds of movies? Like Misery and When Harry Met Sally and the Coen Brothers movies that you worked on are really different kinds of movies.
Well, I think this goes back to film school, but I never called myself a cinematographer or a director of photography. I called myself the friend of the director. So that would mean, in the case of the Coens, I would design shots with them. In the case of Penny Marshall on Big, or Throw Momma on Danny DeVito on Throw Momma from the Train, or even a lot of with Rob on When Harry Met Sally and Misery, I would design the shots. I did it with the Coens as a team, and to a certain extent also with Rob. But I would also say to Rob, does Kathy Bates' clothing look too new? Or did they have more energy before we went to lunch, and now that it's after lunch and they're digesting their tri-tip? You only read about tri-tip on movie sets. It's the only time you'll ever read about steak that's called tri-tip is on movie sets for some reason.
Unless you're talking about Central California. Central California is big on tri-tip.
Is it? Okay,
Yeah.
I've got it. I'll check it out.
Fresno.
I'll move to
You
Sacramento.
go to Fresno, it's all tri-tip talk.
Okay, good to know. Again, at film school, because you had to do everything, you had to do your own editing and you had to work on other crews in the sound department or as a gaffer. I just learned how to make movies, and I felt it was my job to help the directors about anything. So with Joel and Ethan, it was about, figuring out how to technologically move the camera in the weird ways we wanted to move. And I always had really great crews. The secret to success is hire people that are better than you, because you'll get all the credit anyway. So in the case of Rob, I would talk to him about performance or wardrobe or, design the shots with him, different lenses. When Harry Met Sally was, I called it a handsome lens. Same with Miller's Crossing for the Coens. Neither of those were wide-angle lenses shows. So it's fun working with different directors because somehow all the movies seem like I shot them anyway, and I don't know why that's the case.
Were you worried that you were going to accidentally start working on terrible movies? Were you aware of the lucky string you were on?
I had a really good string. There's another movie that few people have seen that also has a very wacky camera called 3 O'Clock High, directed by Phil Giuliano. That was after Throw Momma and also Raising Arizona. Although the union wouldn't let me in, so I had to be called a lighting consultant. So I don't have credit as a cinematographer on that, but I was very lucky, and I probably didn't realize how lucky I was that I picked all those really great movies to work on.
So Men in Black is obviously one of the great blockbuster comedies of ever. And it is also one of the most extraordinary comedy pairs on screen in any movie, in Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. Tommy Lee Jones was not a comedy actor, and Will Smith was not the studio's choice to play that role.
That's right.
So how did you end up with those two dudes?
The studio and the producers wanted Clint Eastwood for the Tommy role and Chris O'Donnell for the Will Smith role. Luckily, Clint dropped out early on and didn't really, just read the script and didn't want to do it. Chris was interested in doing it, and Steven Spielberg made me go take him to dinner at the, again, at the Four Seasons on Doheny, important in my life. And I went to dinner with Chris. The problem was my wife and I read scripts together. We lie in bed. She gives me a 50-page head start, and we finish simultaneously. That's how perfect we are in marriage. And I turned to her, and I literally said Tommy Lee Jones, and she literally turned to me and said Will Smith. I didn't know who Will Smith was. I had never watched Fresh Prince, but Sweetie was a big fan of Fresh Prince. So I take to Chris at dinner, and he tells me, the script needs a lot of work. And I said, not only does the script need a lot of work, but I'm not a really good director, and I don't even know if this material is going to be like up my alley or anything. Do you have any other projects available? And he goes, yeah, I'm circling this other thing. I said, you should do that. So the next day, Chris's management called Spielberg and said, Chris isn't going to do your movie. I arranged for Will Smith, who I had never met, to come out to the Hamptons where I lived and Steven spent the summers. Will helicoptered out from a wedding in Philly, met Steven, and got hired. The thing about Will and Tommy is you never want two funny people in your comedy. You want Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. You want Abbott and Costello. You want Lucy and Ricky Ricardo. You have two guys trying to be funny, and you're dead. There's no comedy. It's a disaster. So I've got Will Smith being really funny, and the first day I start to work with Tommy Lee Jones, and this is in the book, and he's very intimidating. Have you ever interviewed Tommy?
No.
Oh, well, you know what? Yeah, Tommy's an interesting guy. So he tried to be funny. His first line of dialogue in the movie, he's talking to an alien that has flippers and a weird nose and looks like an alien. And Tommy's first line to this alien who's gibberish, speaking gibberish in an alien language, which Tommy understands. The line is, as written, "That's enough, Mikey. Put up your hands and all your flippers." As performed by Tommy, it was, "That's enough, Mikey. Put up your hands and all your flippers." Cut. "Hey, Tommy, I think it's going to be funnier if you don't acknowledge that put up your flippers is funny. See, you do this every day. It's government issue. It's GI. That's not a big deal to you." Tommy looks at me as if I should be dead. Weeks go by. I won't let Tommy be funny. I won't let Tommy be funny. His manager calls me. His agent calls me and says, "You don't want Tommy to be funny. You only want Will to be funny." I said, "I promise you, the straight guy, the not funny guy, always gets a bigger laugh because he is the audience's point of view. And you're letting the audience find out where the joke is instead of you telling him." And I mentioned, as we discussed, I shot When Harry Met Sally. So I was there for the famous "I'll have what she's having" scene. And as funny as Meg is faking an orgasm, you cut to Billy Crystal doing nothing but staring, and the audience goes from 80 dBs to 180 dBs off of his reaction shot. And I promised him, his manager, agent, that Tommy would be as funny or funnier than Will. We finished the movie. Tommy sees it. We now have our press junket, and the press is all over Tommy. How did you get to be funny? How did you know you would be funny? And God love Tommy. Tommy said the secret to being funny is stand next to Will Smith and do whatever Barry Sonnenfeld tells you to. And wow, from Tommy Lee Jones, that's pretty great.
You ended up making these huge movies. You made 2 Addams Family movies, 3 Men in Black movies. You made Wild Wild West. You made a bunch of, maybe Addams Family didn't start as this, but these big kind of blockbuster-ish movies. Did you like doing that? Did you like living with the idea that either this movie makes $200 million or it is a failure?
Oh, $200 million would have been a failure. It's funny you ask that, because coming from my career with Joel and Ethan Coen, really, if you ask me if you ever were a director, what kind of movies would you be making? I'd say I'd be making movies like Wim Wenders. I'd be making An American Friend, or, small indie feeling movies. And then Addams Family felt like a small movie to me until we were done making it. And then it did really well at the box office. And that led to more and more things. And obviously, the bigger the budget, you as a director tend to make more money. So I was making decent money on some of these big movies. The disastrous one was Wild Wild West was not a good movie, nor was Men in Black 2. And both of those 2 movies had a lot of the same problems, which were script and casting, which, as we discussed, Rob Reiner says that's 90% of directing. So I failed as a director by letting the movies go without having a good script and having really dumb scenes in them, and by not casting it properly. So I never thought I'd be doing these kind of big blockbuster movies. I really imagined much smaller. Get Shorty, for me, is the most Barry of all the movies. It took me 6 years to get it made. I read the novel by Leonard Cohen on a cruise.
Elmore Leonard. You said Leonard Cohen.
You remember Elmore Leonard's famous Hallelujah?
Yeah.
Elmore Leonard, thanks. Elmore Leonard, I read it. I had never read an Elmore Leonard book. Loved it. Made Sweetie read the book and said, who's the lead in this? And we both said Danny DeVito, who ended up not being the lead. It ended up being Travolta. But for me, what the book was about and what the movie is about is only about one thing, which is self-confidence. If you have self-confidence in the movie business, you will rise to the top. And what Chili Palmer, who eventually played by Travolta, had, and what Danny has in spades, surprisingly, is self-confidence. You know, I tell the story in the book that when Danny went into audition for Taxi, he knew he wasn't going to get the part. He was an unknown actor who's short, not particularly handsome or anything. So he knew he had nothing to lose. Walked into the audition with, you know, Ed Weinberg and the Jim Burrows and the Charles brothers. And he said, before we start, which one of you a-holes wrote this piece of crap? Although he didn't say the word crap. But I know you bleep out those words, so I'm trying to make it without me being bleeped. But they laughed hysterically, and he got the part. And it was all about, I know I have nothing to lose, so I'm going to come in with total self-confidence and own the room. And that's what Chili does in Get Shorty. But that's the kind of movie I thought I'd be making, is those sort of medium budget, if I were lucky, medium budget, small movies that felt kind of funny.
Do you have a secret desire now to make parlor dramas?
I have a movie I've been trying to make for 20 years, written by Mark Haskell Smith, called, and it's the most unfavorite word in the English language, it's called Moist. That is hilarious, and the closest thing to Get Shorty that I've ever read, and I may finally be able to make it. I'll come back in a year and tell you if I made it or not. But we're close to maybe getting the financing to make this very small 35-day kind of shoot, and it would be lots of fun.
Well, Barry Sonnenfeld, I sure am grateful for all your time, and I enjoyed the book so much, to say nothing of your film. So thanks so much for talking to me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, and I love your show so much. So I'm so honored, Jesse, to be on your show. So thank you.